Hi
everyone. Welcome to our YouTube channel.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Now you can see us, not just hear us. And before we start, we thought we'd show you all the shenanigans that we have to go through to get ready to record in this pretty tiny space.
It's absurd. So let's start. You want a tour of our laundry room? Well, my laundry room. Okay, so you can see this is the lamp we use for lighting. We're hoping that's going to work.
Super quality.
Yeah. This is my kid's swim bag because it's summer. Here is my laundry machine, my dryer sheets. I mean, we are quite literally in a laundry room. So you're going to get a tour as we reshuffle ourselves. So here we go.
Yeah.
Okay. You go this way.
Stools.
We've got these little stools.
Hi.
Hey!
What happens when two parent coaches,
one a Christian,
and the other an agnostic Jew,
sit down to talk about parenting?
they take their listeners from surviving to thriving?
I'm Dina Thayer,
And I'm Kira Dorian,
welcome to Raising Adults.
a podcast brought to you by Future Focused Parenting.
Welcome to Raising Adults. This is literally what we do before every episode.
Yeah.
For the past 2 seasons, and now you get to see it, which is so exciting.
Yeah, that part's kind of cool. And you can see how literally cozy we are. We have to watch things like what we eat for lunch.
Yeah, I never eat garlic. I always feel bad if I forget and I eat something garlicky, and then,
And we're like right in each other's
you're like literally
face.
snuggling. It's
Yeah.
a snuggle fest in here.
Mhm.
So we're going to get started with episode 2 of season 3, which is all about sharenting. Kids and sharenting is what it's called.
Sharenting.
Why don't you tilt it that way just a little bit so you're not as squished. And we're going to
Let's
get
jump
going.
in.
Do you want to host? Do you want me to host?
I hosted last time.
Okay.
So why don't you go for it? We'll alternate.
Okay. There you go. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for being with us today. Kira and Dina here from Raising Adults podcast, and it is our second episode of season 3, and we're very excited to be back with you. And we picked a topic today. It was Dina's pick, actually. She discovered this term. I had never heard of it. And she was like, I think we should do an episode on this. And I said, yes, because I have a lot of thoughts and they're all conflicting. I almost want to say this is like super mom fail on my part. Like when I heard this term, I was like, oh man, I have really effed up. Like, ooh, no. So I think it's important that people hear when we are failures, because you can't get through life and you can't get through parenthood without failing. But this is probably going to be that for me, because it was really eye-opening even just hearing this term.
Well, and the other thing I think that's great about that is that it's controversial even just for you. So what that tells me is I think for our listeners, they're going to have some different opinions about it too. And I think that'll make it an interesting topic to discuss.
Yeah, I totally agree. So why don't you tell everyone what the word
What it is.
what it means, and then maybe if you have a why around this, I need to think about my why, somehow justify my behavior. So yeah, you go for it.
Is this what happens when you aren't future focused?
Yes.
You have to go and plug in the why to make it work?
Yes, that's exactly what happens when you're not future focused. So go ahead.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. So I recently came across and read about this rather newer idea called sharenting. And basically what the term means is that you're parenting somewhat through social media in a way that maybe when your kids get older, they're not going to be a fan of. So I think a great example that I read about was potty training. A lot of times parents will post long diatribes about what a struggle it's been, maybe even with a little bit of a, while safe and modest, still like a blackmail photo, you almost might call it, of like the potty chair or whatever. And what they're finding is in this increasingly digital age, as kids become tweens and teens, they're starting to have an opinion about that and feel like, wait, you posted some things I didn't get a say in, and I'm not okay with that. And then how do we handle that? And while we've done an episode on screen time, we hadn't really tackled the social media beast itself. And so I think there's an interesting combo there too. But the other side of this coin is, don't parents have a right to talk about parenting and to share what's going on, and even things that might be good, and want to be able to talk about that? So I think there's a lot of material here where it's kind of dicey.
Mm-hmm.
And because this is a newer concept, and I literally am in that sandwich generation where I was raised without all this technology, but am parenting with it.
Right.
I don't know that I had much of a why around this either, but what's been a little bit of maybe a bonus for me is that my kids are older. So when I came across this idea and even found out about this trend, I was able to ask them, are you feeling uncomfortable about the way I've done this? Or do you have any problems with what I've posted in past years and things like that? And they actually are okay, I'm relieved to say, because I think I'm actually in the same boat as you. I don't think I had a lot of intention around this because it was coming out as I was parenting. I mean, it was literally happening in tandem.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I had formed this philosophy or mission statement, so to speak, of how I'm going to handle social media as a parent.
Yeah, because it's totally different. Like we say social media, people think, you put social media and parenting together and you think, how am I going to handle my kids' use of social media? But we really don't give a ton of thought to how am I handling my use of social media? Yeah.
It's a lot. And so that's where you get that fun, which of course I also like this as a word nerd, the fun munch of the words. You know, you're sharing things on social media as a parent, so you get sharenting. I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's
I
a
love.
portmanteau, right?
Yes.
You've heard of those.
I love little wordy smushes.
Yeah, there's whole Facebook groups for portmanteaus, by the way.
Oh, really?
You should join. Dave's
It's
in
like a mashup for vocabulary.
Yeah.
And I love
They're
that.
brilliant. Some of them are so incredibly clever. But I digress because I don't want to have to talk
So-
about how badly I fucked this up. Like,
Are you trying to procrastinate?
Yeah, a little bit.
Are we putting this off?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yes. Stalling. So I can't say I've done this perfectly. Literally, I had a memory come up on Facebook just the other day that was 9 years old. So my people were little. They were 6 and 8. And this is the kind of thing we're talking about where there's this backlash later on of kids saying, hey, that wasn't fine with me or whatever. So I'm curious why you really think you screwed up in this area. What do you mean by that?
Well, let me say this. I think I should share why I should have had a why and what my why should have been.
Oh,
Does
great.
that make sense?
Let's hear it.
Because I do think there's a why here. And I actually have some friends I think who did this really well and I just wasn't paying close enough attention. I have friends who don't post pictures of their kids. They don't talk about their kids. They don't use their kids' names. They use an initial. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I never gave a ton of thought to it. And now that we're having this discussion, I'm like, yeah, that was really smart. So I think the why should have been that they are one day going to be their own human being. And this idea of informed consent, right? That we are actually, I mean, God.
In the birth world,
So,
hello.
I have to tell you, so Dave has a nickname for me, which is Puddle Duck. After Jemima Puddle Duck. I don't know if you heard of Jemima Puddle Duck. Must be a British thing. Anyway, Jemima Puddle Duck is a little bit of a klutz. She's a bumbler. She puts her little webbed foot in it sometimes. And so he calls me Puddle Duck because that's me. And I think this is a great example of my puddle duckness is this situation. Like, I'm a relatively intelligent human being, and every now and then I'm just a puddle duck. And I puddle duck this. I like puddle duck the crap out of it. So I think the why should have been thinking about when my kids are grown and they're their own people and they're professionals and, you know, all these things, what will they want publicly announced? And I think what you said is so spot on because there is this thing that our generation uses social media as a way of, I think, processing our parenting. I certainly did. It was a way of putting out what was going on for me when things were hard. It was a way of celebrating things when they were successful.
Well, and let's be honest, don't we also crowdsource for advice sometimes or
Absolutely.
recommendations? And that we use that platform to get some help sometimes or get resources.
Absolutely. And I think the other part that's really interesting about this is that our children are growing up in an age of oversharing. So the other question is, you know, perhaps the current teens and tweens aren't liking it, but actually I don't know with Reese and Rhiannon's generation if it won't just feel totally
natural,
normal.
yeah.
So that's a curious thing too. But I do wish I had given more thought because, and I'll give you an example that like came to me as immediately when you told me this word. I
Okay.
could think immediately of an example where, oops,
Oh,
like puddle duckness. So Reese is I'm going to do it right now. Here I am. I'm Sharenting. Like, I have learned nothing.
pitfalls of having a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, this
about
is the thing,
parenting.
like when your professional world collides. But
Yeah.
anyway, we can go into that in a minute. Reese is a super picky eater and has been, it's on video. Everything's on video now. Oh my gosh. One of my children is a very picky eater. And they one day finally ate a bagel for the first time, and I was so excited that I posted it on Facebook. I was like, this child ate a bagel.
It's a
My
milestone.
whole world has opened up. Sandwiches are possible. I mean, I was so excited. And like 3 days later, we had friends come over, and they went up to this child and said, I saw that you ate a bagel. So loving, so supportive. And my child's face fell. It was like I had publicized, as I'm doing right now, their private struggle. And I don't even know that I have an answer for this on this particular episode, because we're pretty good at giving answers, and I don't know that I have one today, because it is really tricky. For me to be a good parent, I need to process. It's not always readily available with a friend, because even though we're in this interconnected time, we're actually the least connected we've ever been. I think that's a struggle, because we don't want our children to feel that we're outing them, shaming them, putting them in a position of feeling powerless. But I also don't think I need to ask my 2-year-old permission to talk about them in a way that's helpful to me. So it's a really fine
Because
line.
both of these people are people with rights. You are too. So
it's a lot like your drugs and alcohol episode.
Right.
That, what you shared was your story to tell. You were a part of that story, but you also sought out permission to talk about the topic. It's just very complicated.
It is.
And again, a 2-year-old is not the same as a 17-year-old.
No.
A 20-year-old, a 14-year-old, even an 11-year-old. You're looking at like really different abilities to understand the long-term implications. I don't know. I'm not articulating myself well today, because I think this topic has really sideswiped me a little bit.
Well, and I think what we're seeing, and this is great, I'm even going to say this to the video, here's a great parenting mantra. Nobody has all the answers.
Right.
Like, here's something where Kira, literally a parent expert, someone I look up to, she's like who I want to be when I grow up. And and she's like, yeah, I don't know. So when you hit an issue, even if it's not this one, where you're like, I don't know, congrats, you're normal.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah. I remember posting a picture of Rhiannon when she was 3, 4. She was topless. And my aunt texted me and was like, you can't post that. That could you don't know where that's going to end up. And I just never thought of it. And she was right. And so I'm now very careful about if they're topless, they're covered, they're under a blanket,
Yeah.
So I've given some thought to that. But there's been a couple stories that are funny that later down the line are going to be funny. And I also know when they were little and they couldn't understand me. And again, I was in a darker place, so I was very vocal and verbal about what a hard time I was having.
Yeah.
And I remember the transitional time, even just out in the world, when I realized they could hear me and understand me. And boy, I needed to shift that dialogue, because if they're hearing mommy say all the time, this is so hard, twins are so hard, what's that going to do to them later down the line? And I always feel like I'm a little behind the 8 ball with that. I tend to catch myself like one step too late. I make one misstep, then I learn, and I don't do it again. But a couple times I've had that where I've been on the wrong side of the realization.
That was me with positive self-talk about my body. I caught that one too late, and I was kind of berating myself and realizing, not realizing, that's not even the right word. Of course I knew it somewhere, but not thinking overtly about, wow, there's some extra sets of ears hearing this. And so I think this can be an example of that. Sometimes people start doing something a certain way with handling their social media and how they talk about their children and what they're going through, and then maybe have to look at it later and think, oh, maybe I need a course correction, or I need to at least tweak some things. And I was thinking about your comment about a shirtless child too, how now even with some of the actual restrictions in the internet, like things can be flagged as, oh, it's not appropriate, or it's child porn, or whatever, when it's so not. It's a kid in the wading pool or whatever. But there's all kinds of ways you can proverbially step in it and maybe not have thought about it or meant any harm at all.
Right. Well, and here's the other piece that,
It's like a
that
landmine.
I know is a huge reason as to why this got out of my hands is we have family in the UK. this is literally how they stay on top of us and how I'm able to kind of, I can push out one photo with a funny story and it can reach all of our extended family in the UK. And yeah, could I do that by text? Yeah, I could. Is it easier to do on social media? Yes, significantly. And so there's that piece too of like, we are so many of us are not living near family. We want to keep people abreast of the situation. We want to share photos, and it's a beautiful part of social media. It's actually one of the only reasons I'm still on it, aside from business stuff.
Agree.
How do you do that without posting pictures of your kids? And I mean, it's just very complicated. It's a very complicated topic.
I agree. And I've said this before, but I wouldn't be on social media if it wasn't for those same things. Obviously, for the business piece, you have to have it. But for me personally, it's because of having family who aren't nearby. And kids change so fast. I mean, even now, my kids might look the same in a few months, but they'll have some new accomplishment or achievement or this is the way people can keep up with what's
without you
going
having
on.
to call everybody.
And
all
if
the
you
time.
have little people, let me tell you, I mean,
so
I have a
fast.
sister who moved to Arizona and has all young ones, and I'm so grateful that I can see pictures and video of them and know what's going on with my nieces and nephews. I wouldn't as readily at least be able to do that otherwise. And so I like what you said. Could you technically do that another way? Sure. Are there some people who maybe have intentionally done it that way to avoid this whole fray? Yep. Should they maybe be commended? Probably.
Yeah.
But is it easier? I love the word you use. Yes, significantly.
Yeah, but
It
we aren't about
is.
easy, Dina.
No,
this
we
is
aren't.
The thing. It's interesting. It's like,
But that's
it's
what
like
I'm
we
saying.
are being challenged to consider our platform, which,
Well, and
which I stand by.
And I think to practice what we preach, which is do the harder thing because it's the better thing.
Right. Which is what we should have done.
Of course, I'm in the opposite place because I've a few times asked my kids, can I just take down my Instagram or whatever? I just don't. No, Mom. Sometimes I want to tag you in my story. And I want to mention you about this, and I just melt because I love that they still want to do that. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm staying on social media.
I love social media.
So I'm like on the other side of this in a weird way, where they want it,
Yeah.
but what we're talking about is what happens if you've maybe done something that later they've decided they don't want.
Well, and here's another twisty twist.
Let's
Let's
add
just
it.
like throw this into the mix. But there's also this thing that happens on social media. I almost want to call it like over-sharenting or humble sharenting, humble brag sharenting, that we're all guilty of. I use Facebook sometimes as a means of bragging about my kids, and not in a yucky way. I hope no one ever sees it that way. I'm sure some people do, but more in a like,
I'm proud of them.
Yeah, and my kids have sometimes said, "Are you going to post that on Facebook?" So I think they see that too as a way of kind of celebrating and honoring their successes. And it gets tricky because it's like, well, then if that's all that you're doing, then people are going to be like, all she does is brag about her kids. Whereas if I also post the picture of, the poop-stained wall that someone decided to paint, I'm not saying that happened, then I'm sharenting.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, then we should just all come off social media and not use it is essentially the solution to this problem. But social media does have some really positive benefits in terms of building support and community and connecting people. So, yeah.
Well, if I was honest that I didn't really have a why because it was happening as it was happening, but I can share a couple hows, but I've got to be honest, they're going to relate more to people with older kids. I'm going to be really real that I don't have the answer for, say you have a toddler. I don't. It's just the reality. But two things that I have done that I think have been really successful and have helped my kids feel respected and honored is asking first whether or not I may post about something. So even a positive thing, like say I'm really proud of something that happened. This literally happened this week. And I had to ask, like, this is too far, right? This is like kind of yucky proud mom. And I was able to hear happily, no, it's totally fine. So the whether or not question, with older kids, they can have a say, like, no, you're not doing that. And then you just, sorry, you don't get to. And I've been fine with that when they've said no. So I think asking whether you can post is great. But here's an interesting one. In this day and age with teens who want to post all the time, I've also asked, do you want to post something first? So like the timing of it, like, may I post about it? And if so, do you want to announce this first? And then can I piggyback on that? Or would you rather just you're the only one? And will you? And if so, then will you tag me? You know, 'cause then I gotta get in there, right? I'm mom, right? But that's been another one too, is just the timing of it. Because sometimes it's really important to them. It's their news, and they might say, yeah, but let me first, or I'm just going to. And so that's been really helpful for us. But I know that wouldn't maybe apply if you've got a 3-year-old. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I have this picture when my kids were just about 1, and we took them to see Santa for the second time. They both, you know, that photo that every family has of like the screaming child on
I
Santa's
think I
lap?
got it as a Christmas card. I felt very special.
Yeah, that was the only year we did Christmas cards because the photo was so epic because they were both screaming. This is the beauty of twins. They were both at the age where Santa was terrifying and we had left them on this man's lap, you know, and they're both screaming. And we sent out this amazing holiday card that said, he sees you when you're sleeping.
Oh, that's right.
And they were like screaming. It was amazing. And I blew it up into a 16 by 20 canvas because my plan, and this is what I'm doing, is every year I bring it out at Christmas, and I intend to do that until they're 18 and just absolutely embarrass them.
Part
you know,
of the job as
part of absolutely
parent.
it's a responsibility
Yes,
as a parent.
part of the job description.
But I think that whilst that is funny and everything within the context of your home environment, that perhaps that would have been a better mantra to have from the start. Like if I could go and do it again, you know, sort of like, is it something that is funny in our home, but perhaps longer term wouldn't be so funny
Out in the world.
Yeah, like would I want if my parents had posted this?
That's a great distinction
You know.
to make. Well, see, there's a good
There we
how.
go. Yeah, it's
You
a
just
great how. I
didn't
just
do it in
didn't do
advance.
it. But yeah, I think maybe that's a good way of looking at it. If my parents had posted this and said this, would I have been okay with it? And if not, you know, then don't share. And I think it's something you said on when we were interviewed on Brittany Homer's podcast, the Raising Today's Kids podcast, about, you know, just having these relationships with people who see
Who are
differently.
different, yeah.
You said, you know, it's also important sometimes to know when not to say anything. And I think because we are in this season of life, or season of the world and humanity where it's all about sharing all the time, we forget that sometimes it's actually okay to not post something or not. I don't have to celebrate everything. So I maybe those would be the two hows. If I could do it differently, I would think if my parents had posted this, would I be okay with it? And do I have to share it? Is it actually necessary? It's kind of like that, what's that, you love your, what are they called, acronyms?
Oh, yes.
What's the acronym that you love about, is it THINK?
Mm-hmm.
Tell everyone that one. That's so great.
Yeah. I, of course, didn't come up with this. It's everywhere. But the think before you speak. And so before you say something, you ask each of the letters. So the T is it truthful? H, is it helpful? I, is it intelligent? We've also used inspiring. N, is it necessary? And K, I'm telling you, even if you get through all 4, if you get to this one and it's a no, don't say it. Is it kind?
Yeah. So
maybe think before you speak.
And maybe think before you post. Like same concept,
Absolutely.
right? Like go through and is it kind to post a humiliating photo of your child? And again, like I say this without judgment because I have posted many a humiliating photo of my child. But I also think one of the things we talk about, and one of the things I pride myself on as an individual, is not being afraid to recognize when I've fucked up and to make a course correction, which we talk about.
Yeah.
So I think the whole topic from the second it came out of your mouth has made me kind of go, okay, course correction needed immediately.
And guess what? That's also good parenting. Good parenting isn't just doing it perfect every time the first time.
No.
It's also being able to recognize, oh, I didn't do that as well as I could have. Let me shift.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to start doing that. It's interesting because I know, let's talk about the work piece for a minute, because I do think for us, we're in a very unique situation, and it's one I know that you know I have struggled with. And I had the same when I think I talked about this on the childbirth episode, that when I teach natural childbirth classes and hypnobirthing and all this stuff, and then my birth just went super sideways. And I remember being in that moment and thinking, how can I face my students? My work world and my personal world just like
Crash.
yeah,
full collision.
Full on collision, and how scary that was. And I think that a lot of people have that in different capacities of work life. You know, lots of people have that. And so for the podcast, this is one of those tricky areas. Like, I know that there's a particular topic that I haven't figured out how to talk about yet because of one of my kids. And because that child's just not at an age to give informed consent, we just can't go there, and that's tricky. Same with Dave and I. Like, I will tell our listeners, Dave does not listen to our podcast. He loves me very much, and he's extremely supportive. And he's like, I don't like podcasts. I love you, and I'm sure it's amazing, but I'm not going to listen. And I was like, okay. And sometimes I'm aware that because I know he's not going to hear it, I might be a little freer with the tongue.
Interesting.
So I think that there is this tricky thing of how much of ourselves do we share, because our work stems from our parenting experience. Yeah. Yes, we work with other people, and we have lots of stories about that too, but our initial philosophy for both of us came out of our own parenting experience. So how do we talk to our listeners about this topic and keep our children's dignity intact? I mean, it's just really tricky.
So crazy. I mean, just recently I've talked to my own kids about this, and they have had some issues with the podcast, to be quite frank. And to be fair, I had to kind of push back because it became evident from some of what they were saying that they weren't listening. And not that I expect them to. They're not parents. It's not really applicable to them.
Can we be clear that it is applicable to Dave, though?
It is. And I want to say shout out to Scott. He listens.
Yes, I know. This is what I say to Dave all the time. Scott texts me and is like, Kira, your episode this week, you guys crushed it. It was so great. And I'm like, thank you, Scott. And then I say to Dave, I'm like, Scott just texted me to tell me what a great podcast it was this week.
Or sometimes I'll catch him with his headset in, and I'm like, making the motion, take it out. What are you listening to? He's like, I'm just getting some great organization tips from these two moms. Like, it's so great, and I love it.
Shout out to Scott.
Yeah, pretty awesome. I'll probably keep him. But literally, I was able to tell by what my kids were saying. Oh, you're clearly not listening. I don't expect you to. You're not parents. It's not as applicable. However, I want to hear what they have to say, because they sometimes get concerned that I'm using this as like the platform to just come home and go, now we're going to try this. I'm like, no, don't worry about that. But I'm mostly talking about things when you were little, and I'm not going to come home and try to re-implement those things. I'm not going to start rotating your toys. Sorry. You don't have any.
Can you imagine if you just like rotated stuff in their room?
Yeah, Sienna, I'm now going to be rotating the books on your bookshelf. So when the Harry Potter books disappear, they'll be back in 3 months.
That's right.
It's just funny. But they are old enough to at least raise those concerns. So you're right. The business and personal worlds can crash, especially on this one, because we're literally talking about something we're still doing and that we're not always doing perfectly and that we're going to mung up sometimes. So, I mean, that's just the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. So I hope our listeners got something out of today's
Even
episode.
if it was just
think. Let's
think
go over
before
that
you
again.
Speak or post.
That's such a good one. So go over the letters again. So
Is
think.
it true? Is it helpful? Is it intelligent or inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind?
Did you see how that's spelled? Think, everyone. Just
T-H-I-N-K.
people who are driving and like half listening.
T-H-I-N-K.
Yeah.
And how about, it's always a good nugget to hear, if you don't have all the answers, you're normal.
Yeah.
And
you say it, because I know we're going to say the same thing.
maybe we weren't. I was going to say, and if you find out you're doing something wrong, you can make a course correction. That means you're a good parent.
Yeah.
You're a good parent.
Thank you. That makes me feel better. And I was going to say, and thinking about, before you post, if my parents had posted this of me, would I be okay with that?
Yeah, and if your kids are old enough, ask them those questions
Absolutely.
I mentioned. Let them weigh in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
All right.
Oh, I have a quote because that would be super applicable to this.
Fabulous.
So I'm going to get it.
Do you want to say that again? I'll
Yeah,
just cut
I
that.
do.
I'll cut that.
Banana! We should have explained banana.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, nope. It's on there.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
but luckily I know it. Okay,
Okay.
so
Start from, and I have a quote today. Make it sound like you
it's going to be
totally
official.
had that planned.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually have a quote today that's applicable to this topic. And the person who said this quote is named Pam Leo. And I love it. It says, let's raise children who won't have to recover from their childhoods.
Yes.
So let's also raise kids who won't have to recover from your social media
Oh my
account.
gosh. I'm like, how can I undo it all? All of it.
No, you just do better going
I'm just
forward.
gonna do better going forward. I will say I deleted almost all of their photos on Instagram because I went from a private profile to a public profile when the Edge podcast launched, and I did not at that point. Once it was public, I was like, no way. So at least I recognized that. Hey,
That's something, right?
it's something. Well, thanks for listening, everyone, and we hope that this gives you some thoughts for yourself to look at your own sharenting. Maybe you do a lot of it, maybe you only do a little bit. Like we've been talking about, it's been very eye-opening for both of us to kind of consider it as a topic worth thinking about. Anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. This is July 15th. I don't know that there'll be anything new if we've done the attribute. And,
Okay. All right. Well, we look. Be sure to join us next week, and thank you for listening. Raising Adults is produced by Kira Dorian, Dina Thayer, and recorded in my laundry room, as you can see for those of you that are watching now. Music by Seattle band Hannah Lee. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
We
thanks
hope you
for
enjoyed
watching.
our very first video recording of our podcast. Tune in next week.
And I think it lived up to it. You got to also see some boo-boos. So see, super
We
fun. You can
promise.
see we make mistakes too. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.